And thanks everybody for having me here today. It's really exciting to be here, and I'm even a little bit nervous with all these people here, so thanks very much for everybody coming. It's really fun. I hope that this talk will be both interesting and informative, but also kind of fun and contribute to this celebratory atmosphere a little bit, I hope. I especially want to thank the committee for inviting me to be here today, and Dr. Gorman for nominating me, and to all of the dozens of community members and students and other researchers that have worked with me and taught me how to do this kind of research over the last several years. Really, I would not be anywhere near standing up here and talking about this if it weren't for all of you guys, because really that's the inspiration behind this. So over the last 10 years or so, a good chunk of my research has been some form of community engaged scholarship. And what I mean by that is that I've been doing research and teaching and service, collaborating with community groups to answer questions that are of interest to them. So this work's led me to several different exciting projects and really rewarding projects with a lot of different people. Projects ranging from looking at the impact of arts on community development in the Calumet area around here. Other projects looking at understanding how low-income young adults fit into a community that's focused on attracting wealthy retirees as a community development strategy in Minnesota. Other projects have looked into the feasibility of tapping into water in abandoned mines for geothermal heating and cooling in the Calumet area around here, and projects looking at how we handle our waste and how we can do better in Houghton and Hancock and Michigan Tech. And these are just some of the examples. But what connects them all and other projects that I've worked on is that they're driven by kind of a community-centered public goods kind of questions that really get at the sustainability of our communities, or that's what I'm going for here anyway. And that's really the underlying interest that drives my work. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I want to spend some time just kind of summarizing philosophies on democratic science. What do I mean by that? And my own interpretation and how I use it in my research and in my work and my scholarship overall. And then I'll use some examples from multiple projects that I've worked on to illustrate how that stuff comes alive. That's the plan. Rather than focus on any one specific research project, I'm going to use different examples to help bring up some ideas. And my goals here are really about sharing ideas, maybe hopefully inspiring some people to think about how they might handle their own work, and also stimulate thinking, get us thinking about stuff, raise questions, that sort of thing. I'm certainly not, I don't even know that I'm an expert in this. I've been doing this kind of work for 10 years and I've learned a lot from it, but there are a lot of other people out there who do a lot of this kind of work too, and a lot of you all are in this room too, so we can draw on other expertise as well. So when we think about what is, well, you know, one thing I wanted to say before I get into this, sorry. In grad school, they never teach you how to do this stuff. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk about it here today, because I have learned some things, sometimes hard lessons, over the years of doing this kind of work. And if I can share some things that I have learned that have worked for me, might save some of you a little bit of time or give you some new ideas, maybe some headaches along the way. So that's democratizing science. What is democratic science? What do we mean by this? In my mind, a big keystone of it is that it's science for the people. So what do I mean by that? It gives people voice, maybe people who otherwise don't have very much voice, to be heard, to get on the agenda. It provides people with evidence and data to make a point, to get on the agenda, to make their opinion count. It answers people's questions and problems, so rather than answering questions that maybe like a corporation might want to know how they can better sell more gadgets, right? And that's an important question, but that's really not what I'm talking about here. I, as an academic, might be intellectually curious about, you know, a gap in the theoretical research, and so I want to try to solve that answer. That's not really what I'm talking about here. Instead, I'm talking about questions that everyday people have that they that can make their lives better. And in order to even know what those questions are, we need to engage with people. So that's where this is coming from. And then also, it's science that shares our data and our research. And not just in peer-reviewed journal articles, but in other places. And I'll go through some of those examples. It's also science by the people. And what I mean by this is that it's not just like we are the people with the knowledge in academia and we're giving it out to the world. Instead, it's recognizing that everybody's got knowledge and experiences, and that's valuable, and they can contribute as well. And we can work together as partners to generate knowledge and share it in a way that matters to people, that empowers people. We all gain skills through doing this and resources, and over time, if we keep working on stuff together, more and more people gain those skills and are better able to analyze problems and participate in democratic society. So it's shared knowledge, and it's collaborative science. It's science that doesn't just focus within our discipline, but instead we've got to reach out across different disciplines to work with the people who are best able to answer the questions of interest. So my background is in sociology and demography and community development to a certain extent. So I can understand some of those things from those perspectives. That's where most of my training and experience is in. But I'm working on projects like mine water geothermal. I don't know anything about, you know, the technicalities of putting in a geothermal system or how to design that or even what matters, right? So we've got to partner with other people to be able to do that. And I say transdisciplinary because it brings in people outside of academia as well as people with different areas of expertise within academia. And sharing data, again. Oh, I don't know what I did there. There we go. Sharing data. On this sense, you know, we oftentimes we share our results. We publish our journal articles, right? But we oftentimes don't share our data. And I think sharing data is really important because we all know, as each individual, there's only so much you can do every day, right? Like, we can't do it all. There's so many interesting questions and important things to do out there. But if we put our data out there and make it available to other people to use, other people can help us answer those questions. You know, it's like the first big hurdle to get over is already done. The data are there, and people can use that and take it and go from it and do their own analysis. So I think it's really important to share. So that's some of the big philosophical things that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about democratic science. I want to spend a minute now talking about sort of my own goals that drive the ways that I try to do this kind of work. And I call it my lofty goals because, you know, we don't always get this right. I don't get this right ever all at once in one project, like ever hardly, but these are like things I'm striving for, right? And I don't think that we should feel like, well, if I'm not like doing all the community engaged scholarship principles perfectly on this project, then I shouldn't do it. Instead, I think that it's more like, okay, do what you can. Do what works with this project and build it all together. And think about those principles and use them as something you want to strive for. But it's okay if you don't get them all on every project. So some of the things I try to do is share data, I said that, and findings, both with the public and with researchers. So some of the ways we can do this is using data repositories, formal avenues for putting our data out there. I'll talk about all of these a little bit more. We can put our data on websites. You know, we all have access to the web. There are people and resources here at Michigan Tech to help us do that. We can write research briefs above and beyond peer-reviewed journal articles that are short, that are policy-focused, that are community-focused, that are available online for free to anybody. We can use the press. You know, we can work with people in the press to get our important findings out there. And we can make stuff like infographics that engage people, that get them interested, that share some data in an important way. And these are all things that I think we all already know, but you know, we get busy in the course of our everyday lives and we're not necessarily always rewarded for them, like in the promotion and tenure process or something like that, right? And so you kind of got to go out of your way and think, you know, I should write that research brief too. And I would argue that it really does pay off, even for things like promotion and tenure, because it gets your work seen so much more. I mean, in my experience, that's like, nobody reads my journal articles that I publish. I mean, maybe, you know, like, I don't know, 10 people maybe read it. Not that many. Maybe if you're really lucky, you might get like 50. but like 500 people have downloaded a research brief that I published not too long ago. And 185,000 people have been on our website and made maps. So it's a big difference. And then also my goals are, I try to research questions that are people-driven, problem-centered kinds of questions that are developed through working with the publics and that are important to broad publics and disadvantaged groups, people who aren't as powerful. And the thing here is that powerful groups and people, they've got money, they've got a voice, right? They can hire somebody to do research that they want done. But there are a lot of people out there that really don't have access to getting their voice heard or skills or nowhere to start with research. And those are the kinds of questions and people that I try to work with in this. And it's about choosing your research question is really important to directing what kind of research gets done, right? So choosing the questions is one of those places where I think it's really important to engage with people, to decide what you even want to study to begin with, what's important. And then working with people, as I said before, to answer that question. And that means, you know, working out together. What is the research process going to look like? Who's going to do what? How are we going to publish the data? How are we going to analyze the results? Analyzing stuff together. You know, I look at it, they look at it, we think, what does it seem like this means? And I've had a lot of really interesting insight come from that kind of a process that I wouldn't have recognized myself, what was going on. You know, having somebody else's perspective to say, you know, it looks to me like this is going on. And I can look into it a little bit deeper, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. You know, that's an important thing that I would have missed on my own. And then the third thing is scholarship that integrates teaching and research and service. This is the way I try to do it, partly because it saves some time, you know, right? It's kind of like multitasking. You're doing all of your 3 things you're supposed to do at once. And so, you know, there are positives and negatives to this, but I think it's worked fairly well for me, and I try to follow this model of building campus community partnerships and involving students as partners as well, and I'm really glad to see some students here, people I've worked with in the past too on this stuff, so thanks. So starting, I want to say a little bit more about sharing data and findings. This is the website, Hugh talked about this one. This is a project that I worked on that was funded by the National Institutes for Health, and the whole point of this project was to create data. So that was like, that's important, right, so that other people can use it. And it's not just data, like researchers use these data a lot, but publics use them as well. And that was the whole purpose behind doing this project. So the data we created here was a set of migration estimates for every county in the United States by age, sex, race, and Hispanic origin. We created the data for the time period 2000 to 2010, and then we brought data that other teams of demographers had created going back to the 1950s into this online system. We put all the data, so we created all the data, and then we documented them really nicely and put them all up on this website. And I just want to show it to you for a minute. Part of the issue with creating the website is, for one, it's really easy for anybody to access, but also, we hope, and I think, it's fun. And most people who've played with it think it's pretty fun too. So some of the things we tried to build into the website, like you can go to map here, for instance, and it'll create a map on the fly. It might be a little slow right now, it looks like. Usually works great, but there we go. We'll see what can happen here. But you can essentially play around with this. You can zoom in and out of the map. You can change this to look at different rates for different age groups. I'm really sorry this isn't working. It's actually the first time I've had trouble with it in a long time. But we must have a slow connection. Part of how we determine what to put on this website is by working with community groups. We worked a lot with University of Wisconsin Extension educators that are based in every county across the state of Wisconsin, asking them, you know, what do people who are working on community development in your county, what do they want to know about migration? What is important to them? They wanted to see these breakdowns by age. They wanted to see some race and ethnic breakdowns. They wanted to be able to compare one county to another. So with the maps are fun. People enjoy that. You can export maps. We also have this where you can create charts. So for instance, we can go to, and the map's tied into the chart, so if I could have used the map, I could have just clicked on a county and brought up the chart. But let's look at Baraga County, Michigan, for instance. And we can quick see a chart there of what the age-specific migration patterns are for Baraga, and we can add another county to compare it to. Let's look at Houghton, for instance. And we can see the difference, and you can see the impact of Michigan Tech here, right, with a lot of students moving in and then moving out after they graduate. The maps, I think, are a little more fun too. You can also download the data, and this is something that's gotten a lot of attention. People have used a lot. I think I said we've had about over 885,000 maps made on here from people. And over 5,000 people have actually got to the part where they're downloading data, which requires a lot of steps, which tells me that people are actually really going through this and using it. And I've heard from people, we've had this up for about 3 years now, I've heard from people from like young professionals groups all over the, like in like Alabama, you know, they'll call me up and like, or email me usually. I used your data for this, and I just wanted to let you know, it was really great. So like I've heard all kinds of different people use these data, which I'm really proud of. Also, data repositories. We also put these data in a data repository that I want to say something about. It's called ICPSR. That stands for the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research. It's based out of the University of Michigan. Michigan Tech is a member. We pay for our subscription to it, but not many people are using it. And so I want to tell you guys about it because it might go away if we don't start using it. What it is, it's a place where you can store your data. They archive it for you. It's really well done. So I don't have to be, and my partners don't have to be the ones serving these data on the website, and making sure it doesn't quit working like it did just now. The ICPSR people handle that stuff for you. And they've got all kinds of data available there that you can just download and use. And you can skip all the steps of like spending a lot of time and money going out and collecting data. They've also got a lot of teaching resources on there. They've got all kinds of data from like Flint water stuff is one of the new sets that they put up recently, to all voting records over the last like 100 years. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff there. So I wanted to give a heads up about that. And then, of course, we do publish papers and peer-reviewed articles. This is something like, so with that last project I told you about, we created the data first, but then you can analyze the data too, right? You can still analyze it yourself and publish stuff out of it and get stuff that is valuable in the academic world. We published 2 papers in the 2 highest-ranking demographic journals based out of that. But we also publish working papers that we make available for free online to everyone. Anyone can download it. We get more citations from the working paper than we do from the paper published in Demography, like the highest ranking journal out there. So, putting your working papers out there, it's a good idea. We also do research briefs. So we did a couple associated with this project. This one that we published with Carsey Institute, it's about 2 pages long. It's been downloaded over 500 times. This other one on how migration impacts rural America just came out like last week. And so I've talked about these top things a lot. When we're publishing peer-reviewed articles, we can use open source, but open source can be problematic, right? You have to pay for it, it's expensive, you may not have grant funding to do so. Of course, it's great to try to write that into your grant so you can, but we can't always do it. You can put it on stuff like ResearchGate, and the mission of ResearchGate is to connect the world of science and make research open to all, right? It's a way of connecting people internationally. You can put your papers up there and it's available to people. Also, in terms of the press and media, University Marketing and Communications here at Michigan Tech, I've had a lot of success working with them. They've done a great job of publicizing a lot of the stuff I've done. And when we do press releases, anytime you publish something that you think is important to people, write a press release. You get to write it yourself. They help you at University Marketing and Communications, and they send it out there to the world, and then your stuff shows up in newspapers all over the place, and people pay attention. It's really kind of great. So for example, we did a press release when we released that data set, and USA Today published that day, this is going live today. This is a great thing. We did another press release maybe 6 months later after people were starting to use it, and The Atlantic published an article about it. And they put the map up on Gizmodo, and it was one of the 13 best maps of 2013. And we did a press release recently on a project here at Michigan Tech where we were looking at the economic parity of getting off the grid using a solar hybrid system. And Allison Mills wrote a great press release. It got picked up a lot of places. My dad called me. I didn't even tell him that I published this. My dad lives in Indiana, and he's like, doesn't follow news like this, right? But he's like, yeah, this showed up on my feed on social media or something that you published this thing. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I didn't even know. So, you know, do the press releases. It does get stuff out there. And stuff like infographics. This is just one. It's not necessarily the best map, but it's one that strikes a lot of people around here of interest, because what it shows is the different geographies for what are the utility service areas for electric utilities, and then it shows how much we pay in rates and how that varies across space. So, like the purple, and the purple is UPCO service area, and the red is the Ontonagon REA service area, and then they correspond down here. So you can see these are, you know, some of the highest rates in the UP, and the whole UP has fairly high utility rates. But it's interesting to compare these to like the municipal places, which, you know, there's lots of little pockets. Most of the cities in the UP have their own municipal utilities, and they pay half as much in electric rates as we do. So getting these kind of infographics and data out there to people are important so that they can build arguments, so that we have some information when we think about what we should do with energy policy and what kind of arguments should we try to make. So why do we share our data? Informed people can make better decisions, right? We want people to be participating in our democracy. Informed people can also organize together to speak truth to power with evidence to back them up. And that's part of this whole endeavor. And then the big thing here is, like, if we don't do this as academic researchers who are not funded by like a corporation or a special interest group, then other people will do it, and they do it. And a particular message gets put out there to the world. And sometimes, you know, it's not a message that really looks at all sides of the issue. So just as one example, something that I've participated in some over the last couple of years and been following is this UP energy crisis. Our utility rates are high and have potential to balloon essentially with the closing of the Presqu'île power plant. So there's been a lot of attention to this over the last couple of years. And there have been a lot of forums that bring a lot of people together to look at what the issues are and how can we potentially solve them. But when you go to these things and, you know, all the people on the agenda are typically the transmission company and the electric utilities, and maybe somebody from the governor's office. And that's who tell us what are the problems and what are the potential solutions. Now, that gives us a particular view of what the problems are and what the potential solutions are. If we, as people who aren't tied to interest groups, don't engage, don't go, don't show up, don't get on the agenda, don't go when we're invited, then other perspectives don't get heard. And I think it's really important that we do this kind of work. It's part of our responsibility to the state, I believe, as a public institution. So in line with these other issues, working with community groups, and I'm going to go through this pretty quick because you guys don't want to sit here forever, I think. With community engaged scholarship, my goal is I'm trying to combine research and teaching and service. As I said, the way I've done it is I try to do this stuff based in courses. There's lots of different ways to do it, but one of the reasons I do that is because I really like engaging students in this stuff as well. I think it's really important for them. And students are great to work with because all kinds of people will tell students anything. I mean, really, like, everybody's willing to talk to students. People who do not want to talk to me, sometimes they don't even want to talk to community members, right? Because they already have an idea about where their position stands. But like students, they're just naive students, you know, like, and everybody likes students. So you send your students out in the world to gather data and to talk to people. People just tell them anything. I mean, they come back with all sorts of good information. But it is challenging to do a good project in one semester. Really challenging. And so what I try to do is to work with the same community group over a period of years so that we can slowly develop and build things. And we try to accomplish little bits in one semester, something that's useful, that we can get our head around, but recognize that we can't solve everything. I also try to build these reciprocal and collaborative campus community relationships. And the biggest thing I hear from folks is, Michigan Tech cares about us? Really? I never had the idea that Michigan Tech cared about us at all. I mean, they never have for decades and decades, but I'm really glad you're here now. And so that's basically the response I've gotten from a lot of people. And I think it says something about where this institution has been, but it also says something about the potential for where we can go and the interest that there is in the community. It also, I'm trying to promote long-term empowerment, as I said, working with group over time, and provide students with real-world opportunities, promote interdisciplinary collaborations in team science. I've said most of this stuff before. Another thing I try to do with this work is to think about it as a case study. So one question I get a lot of times is like, okay, so you do this very applied case study kind of work with this community-driven question. How are you ever going to publish this? Like, how is this generalizable research that you can publish on? And that can be difficult. It's a challenge. You have to think about it. But the way that I think about it is these are case studies. And you can always learn something from a case study. So I'm just like paying attention and being aware, like, what is the generalizable lesson that I can learn here? You can also write and publish about the practice of doing engaged scholarship, which there's a lot of room for right now, and there's growing room for it, and whole journals devoted to it. Some of the outcomes that we've been able to get doing these kind of projects over the last few years, and I just want to start by saying I'm not claiming credit for any of this stuff. There's a lot of things that went into all of this stuff, but we've been involved in some kind of way. We have curbside recycling in Houghton now, which is a new thing, right, and exciting for a lot of us. And I see Dave here. He was a big part in getting that. It's an effort that people have been working on for decades, but now is the right time. We did a project last fall that helped to bring the data to that issue, get it on the agenda, and let people know now is the right time. We hired a sustainability director at Michigan Tech. Again, in part, in response to the fact that we raised this awareness that Michigan Tech maybe wasn't doing all we could do with handling our waste. Houghton right now is a semi-finalist in the Georgetown University Energy Prize, and I've heard from the director there that it looks like we've reduced our natural gas and electricity consumption something like 5% in the last 3 years in Houghton County. I wouldn't stand by that number. This is what she tells me she thinks we're at. There could be other things going on there, but it looks like we're making a difference is the key there. We were able to publish a journal article in the journal Sustainability, a peer-reviewed journal article based out of work that we've done in Calumet looking at art's impact on community development. It's co-authored with Lori Okarainen, who I see here too, which is awesome. She's a community member, and also students, undergraduate and graduate students who worked on that project. We got an EPA P3, stands for People, Prosperity, and Planet. We got a grant from EPA E3 to do some work on exploring the feasibility of tapping into water in the mines in Calumet for geothermal energy. And then the students presented our findings at the Sustainable Design Expo in Washington, D.C. In 2015, and they earned an honorable mention award. And then also they earned this award from the American Institute of Chemical Engineers Youth Council on Sustainable Science and Technology for being the most interdisciplinary and the most community engaged project at the Expo, which came with a $1,000 prize to the students, which was great. We also have an exhibit right now at the Kaiama National Historical Park in the Visitor Center in Calumet that tells people about some of the issues associated with tapping into mine water for geothermal heating and cooling, and actually has a heat pump system set up there. Jay Meldrum's been really involved with that, and the students in the Alternative Enterprise Energy class, the geothermal team. And you can go in there and you can see the working heat pump. You can feel one side blowing out hot air and the other side blowing out cool air, and you can use some of the apps that we've created there on an iPad as well to look at some of the more social issues we've looked at. We've got at least one master's thesis out of this. I got tenure doing this stuff. It is possible to get tenure doing it. There's growing interest in this stuff, both in the community. I get calls from people asking me to do projects regularly. I can't do them all, so I want other people to do some stuff too. And I find it actually really fun and motivating. I want to mention the Copper Country Recycling Initiative was really important in getting this waste and recycling effort off the ground. They're the ones who contacted the Social Sciences Department, Hugh Gorman actually to start with, because he did a project with them well, it was this modified version of the group, focused on Hancock a few years ago. Our work really built off the work that he and his class had done a few years ago. And the Copper Country Recycling Initiative, they were already organized, which is a really key lesson here. Work with groups that are already organized. Life is much easier when you do that. Otherwise, your whole job is organizing people. So work with groups that are already organized and help them to answer their questions. And they really followed this thing through. We collected some data and they took it to the people. They were the ones calling the city leaders. They were the ones really holding the foot to the floor. Oftentimes you get these things like, well, we tried that before, 40 years ago, and it just doesn't work here. That's a really common response. You guys have probably heard it before. A lot of you have anyway. And I really try to argue that, let's look at the data for now. Let's, we're not saying it works here. What we're trying to do is look at the data. We're going to collect the information. We're going to see what's going on. And sometimes the timing is really what matters. So in Calumet, I've been working with folks in Calumet, mainly with the Main Street Calumet community organization, for, I guess about 5 years ago. And this all started where when I came to Michigan Tech, I knew I wanted to do a community development course, and I wanted to include engaged projects. So I was looking for community organizations that already existed to work with. And I just, Googling, found Main Street Calumet, and I didn't know anything about this area. And I called up, and I got Tom Tickinen, who was the director at the time, and he was like, this sounds great, let's talk about it. And so we called together a group of people and, spent some meetings over coffee and just talking about what are some of the issues facing the community? Who are some of the people that might want to get involved? How might we do these projects? And figuring out together some of the questions we wanted to address. Over the course of that time, we've done projects on art, I said before, and their impact on community development. That one was published in Sustainability. We looked at mine water geothermal. Currently, we're looking at whether, what sense might it make for Calumet area municipalities to cooperate more or even consolidate. And this is one that students are working on now. We're going to present, the students are going to present on campus here on December 9th in the Social Sciences Brown Bag at noon. And then in Calumet at CLK Schools on December 12th in the evening. This is one of the key things I try to do with all this work, is we spend a lot of time in the community and we present in the community. So general methods that we're doing, we do a lot of field trips that try to get students on the ground, spending a lot of time with people, getting a sense for how things are. And we do this together, not just with traditional Michigan Tech students, but I try to involve as many community members in the whole process as possible. So they come to class, they oftentimes, they do the readings, they engage in discussion, they do assignments, they're doing the research with us and helping us to interpret it. They can serve as co-authors on papers ultimately as well. So we design that research collaboratively, and we present in the community, we write an accessible report that people can understand. I was going to talk a little bit more detail about the mine water geothermal project, but I think I'm basically going to skip it and just make a few key points. It's really interdisciplinary team. So many people have been involved in this project, and people love the idea. There are some potential complications of it, but it's fun. People have asked me to talk about it from the Bluffs Senior Center. I came and talked about it there. The Kiwanis, the Rotary Club, a lot of people are interested in this stuff. The old miners love this stuff. It's interesting for a lot of reasons, right? Culturally and environmentally. It's exciting to people. The economics of it aren't great right now because our electric prices are high and natural gas prices are really low. That's sort of the end of that. One of the things that's coming out of that is the students wrote a guidebook. So this is one of the ways that we can get more generalizable beyond this applied study in this one community. The students wrote a guidebook for any community anywhere in the world that has abandoned mines, which it turns out there are a lot, thousands and thousands of places, that they can, people in the community don't have to pay a consultant tens of thousands of dollars to do a study to understand whether this is feasible or not as a first step. I mean, ultimately, if you wanted to do this, you would need to actually pay an consultant and get expert advice and plans and all of that. But just to know if you should spend the money to do that, this is a guidebook that can help communities start to get there. And so we talk a little bit in the guidebook about what is mine water geothermal, how to do a community-based participatory planning process, what kind of technical and economic data you need to gather and how you can do that. We look at environmental considerations, some of the political and legal stuff, ownership issues, basically lay out there what some of the issues are and how you can start to address them so that people can have a place to start. And I wanted to finish just with a few comments about doing community engaged work at Michigan Tech or in general. So far I've made this sound like a really great thing, right? But there are some downsides. So some of the reasons not to do it is that it's a lot of work. Both the transdisciplinary stuff, like just getting your head around it and coordinating and all, like the project organization is a lot of work. And it interrupts, it's a bit chaotic and interrupts your everyday life. It's not something you can just plan on the way you can control a normal research project. There's not much control here. So that's hard. It can be chaotic and confusing to students. You know, they're not used to doing these kind of assignments. They don't really understand what's expected of them. It takes a long time to sort of get everybody up to speed and get their head around what you're trying to do here. When you're trying to do a whole project in one semester, that's hard. There's also this question of, are you working with the right people? Like, who's your community? Maybe you're only hearing like one side's voices, and that can be problematic, you know, and it can create political issues and tensions. Sometimes you end up at the edge of your expertise. You know, if the community of other people are coming up with your research questions, what if it's something you don't know about? If it's something you don't know anything about, you probably need to like give it to somebody else, right? But oftentimes it might be something you're kind of like, well, maybe I could do that, but I've got to catch up. You know, I got to learn some things. And so you end up having to spend time learning a lot of new stuff, which can be exciting and rewarding, but it takes a lot of time. You can get burnt out easy. The publishing part is slow because there's a lot of back and forth with all kinds of people, especially if you're sharing it with community groups. And frankly, we don't do this a lot because we don't really know how, right? We're not trained to do this. And it's kind of scary to put yourself out there in this new way. But why do we do it? I think it really makes research matter. It makes it relevant and impactful. There is demand in the community for it. I have a lot of people asking me stuff. Experiential learning like this really enriches students' experiences. It's real-world practice that they can use and apply, and it prepares them for civic life and participation. It's super rewarding. It can be like really, you know, it feels great when it really works out. It's really fun in that sense. Sometimes you really can help facilitate positive change. It makes Michigan Tech look good, right? We provide value to the broader community outside of our students and everybody by doing this. It legitimizes the academy and it can broaden our financial support. Foundations want to fund this kind of stuff. It's even a university learning goal. If we care about that, you know, the university cares about that. And going back to, if we don't do this, somebody else will. There are other people out there, you know, in working, you know, getting their side heard. So a few more lessons and hints. If you're going to do this, especially with students, set very clear deadlines and organizational structure, and it has to be graded. Like the components of it that come in. Like they just don't get that it really matters and you really have to do a professional job on this until they have to turn in that first assignment and you're like, okay, this does not work for our audience. You know, we got to get more serious here. Build trust with people. Keep working with people over time. Work with groups who are already organized. I already said that. Stay close to your comfort zone. You know, it's going to take you outside your comfort zone if you do this kind of stuff, but don't go too far out or you won't be comfortable. Ask for help, reach out to other people. Concentrate on building team spirit and collaboration within your team. You know, I think that's really important. Motivate each other, especially when you start getting political backlash, which happens with doing this. And don't try to solve everything at once, right? Like you can only do a tiny bit at a time and just do your little bit and realize that it can matter, it does matter. And then finally, just a few hurdles for doing this at Michigan Tech. as opposed to other places. I was at Wisconsin before that. It's a land-grant institution. There's a lot more institutional investment in this kind of work at many other places. Frankly, we're really behind the 8 ball at Michigan Tech in doing community engaged work. There isn't a clear reward or compensation system for doing this. We have very little resources. There's no like center on campus or place for community groups to go if they want to do a project. Like, they're just guessing. And there's no place for us to sort of connect, to provide resources. So there's little to no organized support on this campus. It's back and forth questionable in my mind whether we have administrative buy-in for doing this kind of work or not. I think they love it. They love to put it out there in marketing and communication stuff. You know, it makes for great stories. I've had a lot of this stuff, you know, lots of stories about it. But it's been back and forth whether we're going to join Campus Compact, for instance. And so it's hard to say. We have this university learning goal, but we don't have resources backing it up or helping people do this. There are some resources available, though, to help people. And this one that I mentioned, Campus Compact, if you don't know what that is, they call it Campus Compact because it's essentially like a signature thing. Universities sign the compact that says, we're committed to working with broader publics and building campus community partnerships. Almost every country, or almost every four-year public institution around this country has signed this compact. Michigan Tech's currently not signing on. We did 1 year, and then we chose it wasn't worth the money. But I hear that we are officially signing now. Thanks. And we're getting back into this. It's not just a promise, so it's a promise, but it's also, there's a lot of resources associated with Campus Compact for doing this kind of work. They provide grant funding for doing it. They provide lots of webinars and conferences and papers and materials and how-to guides and all this kind of stuff. So you can go to their website, use their resources. Another really great set of resources is with the Engagement Scholarship Consortium. APLU, the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, has really made this a priority. They have an ongoing task force right now on new engagement, as they're calling it. And a lot of our professional associations that we're affiliated with are really pushing this right now. It's sort of like the public science revolution, right? Like everybody's doing public, whatever your discipline is. And there are a lot of colleagues and peers here at Michigan Tech that are doing this kind of stuff, and I think we can work together and ask for advice. These are just a few of them. Dawn LaFreniere and Sarah Scarlett are doing this really cool Q and a Time Traveler project. Sarah Green's got an awesome skeptical science website that's really useful to a lot of people. Joshua Pierce has the Open Sustainability Technology Lab and puts everything out there. Carol McLennan and Noel Urban have done a lot of cool stuff on Torch Lake involving communities. Laurel Meadows and the Honors College crew are really pushing experiential learning and this kind of stuff. And Susan Amato Henderson has a lot of experience in service learning. So these are just a few examples. There's a lot of people on campus doing this kind of stuff. And finally, this is just a quote from the APLU Council on Engagement and Outreach. Higher education must move engagement from the margin to the mainstream by fully embedding engagement into the central core of the institution as a scholarly approach to teaching, research, and service. Thank you.